My name is Dr. Cathy Shanzer. And
You are? And I'm Tom Lewis.
and we're involved with the Southern Eye Clinic in Sarabu, Sierra Leone. When I was in grade school, I heard a missionary speak about the work that was being done and about the poor people and how there were just so many deficiencies in their country and underdeveloped countries. And I decided as a kid that I would someday be a missionary. I wasn't sure if I would be a medical missionary at that point. Along the way, I decided that in order to be a medical missionary, I didn't need a husband or children. So this man next to me, I don't know where he came from. When I was in medical school, you have to decide what your specialty is. And I had been real active in the family practice group, they were making trips down to the border towns. And as a medical student, we could care for patients, which I thought was just so cool. And so I was really having a difficult time determining, did I want to be primary care, like pediatrics or family practice, or did I want to specialize? I tend to be the kind of doctor who gives away my cell phone to everybody. And that got to be a little bit difficult because then everybody calls you all the time. And so we decided that I should really look at a subspecialty that was not so demanding. If we were going to have a family and do the things we wanted to do as far as being married and having a family, that I should pick something else. So I applied to ophthalmology and was accepted. And I went to my counselor at the time and I said, I just don't know. And I love primary care, but I somehow feel called to ophthalmology as well. But I don't want to just do glasses and things like that. And he said, Jesus cured the blind. Do you think you could do that too? I was like really taken aback. I was very humbled by that comment because back then you didn't really talk too much about your faith and training. And so I was really surprised that he made that comment. But it was what I needed to hear at that point. And I've never been disappointed in that decision. I've loved it. I love what I do. I love the patients. I love the surgery. I love the challenges. I love the new technology. So it's just been fabulous. My family's from Hitchcock, Texas, which is the home of Shanzer Supermarket, which means that I grew up stocking shelves, carrying out groceries. And as a matter of fact, our little town didn't have a kindergarten. So when I started the first grade and everybody else could read See Spot Run, I was reading corn and milk and peas and carrots. If it was on a can, I could read it. And so my dad was wonderful. He ran the store and I loved being with him. And I loved working in the store. And my siblings did not like working in the store. So it was just wonderful for me. But we're a family of 8 kids. My mom is a convert and my dad was raised Catholic. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, was one of those Polish grandmothers that had the crystal rosary that's like big beads. And every morning she was sitting there saying her rosary. She's such a wonderful sweetheart. And so, from early on, we went to Catholic schools, made all of our sacraments, and a good upbringing. So all of our background was Catholic, and then yours was too.
Mm-hmm. It was. It was. What's great about their background is the story of her grandfather. He opted for love.
My grandfather, Luke Shanzer, was traveling on a train to go to Vienna to meet the arranged fiance when he met this poor Polish woman, my grandmother, and he gave her all the presents that he was supposed to be giving to his fiance. Obviously, he was upper class and she was lower class. So when they got to his parents' home and he introduced her, they gave him the option. Either you marry who we planned for you to marry, or you're out of the family. And so he went to the dock and there was a ship that was heading to Galveston Island because at that time you could come into the country either through Ellis Island or Galveston Island. And so his options were to come through Galveston Island or to go to Africa. And so they got on the one going to Galveston. The only problem was they hadn't gotten married yet. So when they docked in Galveston, they wouldn't let Grandma off the boat because she was a single woman and they did not want harlots running around Galveston Island. So my grandpa had to run all over the island and he finally found a rabbi that would come on board and marry them. So Here's this old Catholic family. I mean, to the point that my uncle was a Catholic priest. So a strong Catholic background there. And in Tom's family, there are a number of nuns and priests. So we were raised in strong Catholic families. So,
yeah, I grew up in a very traditional Catholic family, 9 children. I was number 6 of 9. I kind of separated my 6 sisters. So 2 brothers were born, then 3 girls, and then me, and then 3 more girls. Mom and Dad had a family business. Dad ran a auto repair shop for most of my life. He opened it in 1960. I was born in 54. And so that's kind of all I really remember or knew. But you know, our faith and practicing Catholics, that was all very important to us, how we grew up. It was just, that was my normal. I went to Catholic grade schools, high school, and even throughout my college life, still stayed very active in the Catholic Church. In fact, that's how we met, was on a Catholic student retreat. We both went to the same place for for Sunday Mass.
But I always went to the early Mass.
Well, my overachiever wife, I slept in, went to 11. She always goes to 9 o'clock.
So we didn't really meet at the Catholic Student Center. We didn't meet until the Catholic Student Center offered this away retreat for Catholic students, and that's where we met.
Yeah, that was in the spring of 1976.
So I'm in the lunchroom working on slides because I'm headed to San Francisco to present the data that I had been working on. And this jock comes in and starts bothering me. And he wants to talk. And I'm like, I really have to review my talk for this meeting I'm going to. But he was pretty persistent.
Well, I was just overwhelmed with this beautiful woman. The moment I met her, I fell instantly and madly in love with her. So much so that I went back to my dorm at Rice, and I told my roommate, I have met the woman I will marry someday. And a year later, she agreed to go out on a date if I promised never to see her again.
But I truly thought that I was called to be a single medical missionary by this point. And my goal in college was to do the best I could to get into medical school, and those steps were what I thought I was being called to. But the Holy Spirit had a totally different plan.
Yeah, I didn't have a particular calling. I thought, well, let's see, I'm graduating from Rice. That's nice. I have no idea what I want to do. Oh, graduate school, let's do that. Maybe I'll figure it out then. But I met Cathy, and I would call her at least once a month to ask her out. And she always had some reason as to why she couldn't go. And I never took that rejection as absolute rejection. I took it as a not now, but later it will happen. We got just about a week or so before I was graduating from Rice, and I really was leaving town.
But he's leaving out a fact, which is because I was a student, I didn't have a lot of money, and I was living with a family in exchange for rent. So I was always babysitting.
But I didn't know that.
Well, you never asked.
So but I just always assumed it was. She's not really saying no. She's just saying not now. That was my positive attitude.
You're so hopeful.
My roommate, about 6 months into it, said, well, let me get this straight. This is the woman you're going to marry, but she will not go out with you. How is this going to work? So I said, well, let's see. I'm leaving town in a week. I called her up. I said, look, I get it. You're, for whatever reason, not interested in long-term relationships. Don't even want to take a chance on one. I kind of get that. That makes going out with me about as safe as it gets because I'm leaving town in a week. I'm graduating from Rice, and off I go. You'll never see me again. But I have been asking for a year. I sort of think that I've earned at least one date. And she went, ugh.
I think this is called Catholic guilt.
I could hear her moan on the other side, but she didn't say no. Usually she would say no. She said, ugh. And I went, this is sounding better. And so she said something like, you promise I will never see you again. I promise. She said, okay. And all I heard was the yes part.
So if you're really trying to woo a woman, do you show up at her front door with a boat and fishing poles and say, oh, we're going to go fishing? Like, He shows up and I'm like, this guy is weirder than I even thought.
It was magical. We went to this lake north of Houston, about an hour. And in the course, we left where you were at about 9 o'clock. So we got out on the water about 10:30 at night. And for the next 3 or 4 hours, we just kept bringing them in.
Actually, I kept catching him because he didn't know I had 5 brothers and had been fishing since I was a kid.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
so he kept baiting my hook and taking the fish off and baiting my hook. And I'm thinking, dumb jock. Oh my gosh, he's so dumb.
We didn't show it because I wasn't picking up on that. But I confess, as soon as I got back to my line, the bait would be missing. I'd get it rebaited, and then she'd be hooking another one. We caught like 6 dozen fish that night. It
Really
was biblical.
It was so, yeah, biblical, yeah.
Well, in hindsight, maybe real biblical. Given how destined we were to affect so many lives, perhaps. But at that moment, it was just the greatest fishing experience I'd ever had for all kinds of reasons. And that went on until about 2 in the morning. And I suggested to her that I was tired.
He pulls one of these. Oh, I'm so tired. I think we need to pitch a tent. I'm thinking, okay, I knew this was going to happen.
So we pulled over to shore, which wasn't too far away, maybe 15, 20 minute little ride. And I did pitch a tent. And I did lay down, and I did go to sleep.
And I walked around the tent all night long listening to...
So she didn't know I was totally harmless. And that was also truthful. I had no ambitions to do anything except sleep. I was tired. We woke up at sunrise and went water skiing. Now, I didn't know she'd ever water skied before or not. She said she had not. Before the date, I didn't know. She came up first time, just perfect form, right out of the water. And I'm thinking, wow, this woman fishes, she water skis. And then I showed her the basic controls, and then she drove the boat, and I water skied. And I thought, okay, if that ain't heaven, I don't know what is. This is just fantastic. And by about noon the next day, we rode back into where she was living, and that's when I met the family that she was staying with.
Tom taught the kids how to clean fish.
That was fun. I had so much fun with the kids, I lost track of her until the doorbell rang. She had another date. She didn't bother to tell me.
I was going to the opera with a friend.
I was being so gregarious in interacting with the family that I answered the door. And there's a guy I knew. And I said, hi. Then it occurred to me he wasn't there for me. And so I took his flowers, and I put them in the water so that Cathy could see them and not have to worry with them. And off they went. And I stayed and helped finish cleaning the fish and playing with the kids. And then we had already decided we'd get back together the next day. So
yeah, because we wanted to cook the fish for the kids.
Yeah, and we did all kinds of things for the next few days. We had a good time. But I did graduate from Rice, and I did leave. But before I left, my dad, he and Mom came down from Dallas to watch me see me graduate from college, and as they were packing up the car and getting ready to drive back home, Dad pulled me aside and said, "Son, could I see you?" Because they'd met Cathy, and she stayed with us the whole time we were going out to dinner and things with Mom and Dad. And Dad said, "Son, I've never really tried to interfere with your love life or offer you any real advice, but I feel compelled to say something here. Try not to lose this one." That's all he said.
And did you?
I tried real hard not to lose this one.
So then we had this long distance relationship.
Yeah, I was in Dallas.
I was in Houston.
And then, and the reason I was in Dallas is my graduate school didn't start until a year later at Trinity University in San Antonio. And I thought, gosh, here I am, the son of a mechanic who owns a auto repair shop, and I don't know anything about cars. This is a great opportunity for me to learn about cars and to also spend some time with my dad. And in terms of the relationship with my father, it was one of the greatest years of my life, to be sure. We had so much fun together. And I was learning all this stuff, and it was really difficult for me to decide what to do as we got closer to the end. But my oldest brother and I spoke before I made a final decision. He said, "Look, I can see how great it's gone between you and Dad." He would not have believed it beforehand because he and Dad had kind of a rough relationship, but it brought them together. He said, "If you decide to go, I'll ask Dad if I can step in and help him," because Dad said to me, he says, "You son of a gun, this has been a great year, but this practice has grown beyond what it was before, and I had it exactly where I wanted it. And then you came along, and it grows, and now you're leaving." And so he and Leslie found the way to put it together. In fact, that business stayed up until just a couple of months ago, when my brother, at the age that 78, he finally sold the family business. And so I went on to graduate school to San Antonio, and our long-distance relationship continued. We would meet in Schulenburg and other places halfway to see a Friday night football game or something as a date in the local school. In the local high school, and different things like that. I had a motorcycle and a full beard. Cathy was in medical school, and we became good friends with Father Balti, who was running the Catholic Student Center at Trinity, because we were thinking, gosh, we want to be married, but between her schedule and my schedule, and it just looked kind of crazy. We didn't see how it could work.
Well, in medical school, after medical school, then there's internship and residency, and it just goes on, and there's just not like a good break. And he was wonderful. He sent us on an engagement retreat weekend where you just discuss all these topics. It was just a wonderful weekend. And at the beginning, there were, 30 couples, and everybody talked about, how they had so many bridesmaids and they had this, that, and another. We didn't even know what we were doing. And
we were the only couple not engaged.
We were not engaged. And at the end, we were engaged.
And several other couples
broke it off.
They decided not to go forward.
Which I think validates the process. So
we were feeling pretty good about that.
We felt good about that.
And then some guy, we set the date for June of 1979, June 16th. But about halfway there, about March, something like that, I got a call from this crying lady. She was so upset. She had just been told by one of her faculty members that she could be a physician or she could be a wife, but she couldn't be both if she was really going to be
committed to medicine.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that.
So she was crying and questioning whether or not she wanted to get married, questioning whether or not she wanted to be everything, just threw everything upside down. And I was sitting on the other end of the phone just boiling. I was so upset because I'm thinking, I asked her, I said, let me guess, this guy has a wife and kids at home, right? Right. And he's telling you can't do what he's doing. And yes. And I said, I'll be right there. And I was almost right there. I got on my motorcycle, and that's the fastest I've ever been for an extended period of time on the freeway and never run into a policeman. I got to Houston in about 2 hours. And
to this day, he doesn't know who that faculty
Let me at him. Who is this guy? And I was going to go punch him out for upsetting my future wife. I don't know who it was.
But Tom
that may have been the most angry she's ever seen me.
Tom did all the planning. He went to a little card shop and he got the invitations.
Well, we only needed 10.
Well, because we only invited family, so.
Yeah, we invited just our immediate family, and 100 people showed up.
Yeah. So, and I made my dress, so it wasn't like there was a lot to do with the whole thing.
We had a $500 budget. And our rings, this was $25.
Yeah, and mine was
$12.50.
Yeah, so it's lasted all these years. It worked.
We had barbecue, and Cathy's family from the Houston Galveston area came over. My family from the Dallas area. It was sort of a nice little retreat for everybody, a neutral ground. Mm-hmm. That's what drove us to do it that way.
And then I went back to Houston medical school, and you stayed in San Antonio.
For 2 more weeks. I had 2 more weeks to go, and then I boogied on back to Houston, and we set up our little first apartment.
One of the things that we had discussed before we got married, though, is adopting kids. So I had read this book that's called 19 Steps Up the Mountain, and I don't even think it's in print anymore. It was a wonderful story about a couple that had 6 children of their own and then decided to start adopting handicapped children. And after they adopted a couple, the man died. So this woman's got 6 of her own kids and a few handicapped kids, but she met a guy at church who was totally on board with this. They got married, and the ultimate was 19 kids. And the kid that was blind would help the kid with the prosthesis, and the one with the prosthesis would help the one who couldn't hear. And it was the most beautiful story of love and handicap, and how they all had their little bins in the laundry room. I mean, it was just so heartwarming. And so we decided before we were married that we would adopt. So when I was
we thought we'd have some of our own and
adopt a
some.
few. Yeah.
But about 4 years into our marriage, we learned that I was not able to father kids. And so we just kind of went ahead with our plan. Okay, on the production side, the number's going to be 0. But on the adoption side, which was still part of the equation, we left that really up to God.
So I was a resident at the time, and we thought, well, let's go put our name on the list. Everybody talks about it takes years to adopt. So we're really very intelligent people. We open the phone book and we see the Christian Child Help Foundation. Sounds good, right?
Christian, gotta be good.
So we walked in and we said, we're interested in adopting. We had no idea what this entailed, none at all. Turns out this was this particular agency only placed hard to place kids. So they only placed mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, and those over the age of 2 fall into the category of hard to place, as well as sibling groups. So they talked to us for a few minutes and learned we're from big families, yada, 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 and then said, we have a group of 3 in the emergency shelter. Would you be interested in taking them? And we were just like floored. You know?
You mean like now?
Like, you mean now? Yeah, right?
Well, we'll have to expedite the process, but not immediately. A couple of weeks.
It was
a couple of weeks.
we were living in a dumpy little rent house that ultimately the roof fell in on us, and we turned the living room into a bedroom. And
like all of our big decisions, we took at least 5 minutes to think about it and prayed on it.
The first sibling group moved in with us in November with literally the clothes on their backs. They had no books, no toys, no coats, no pajamas. And being a resident, the staff, the secretaries, the nurses, they came together and helped us out. The Lewis family came together and helped us out. My mom, who's very organized, assigned each one of my siblings a kid, and whether they were going to give them Sunday clothes, play clothes, pajamas, she had it all organized. Everybody was in. And so we got the things we needed pretty fast. The public school was within walking distance, and that's where we put them in school initially. Childcare was very difficult because I was a resident, so I used the YMCA. My kids, I would drop them off at the YMCA like at 6:30 in the morning. Oh my gosh, poor kids. And they would feed them and take them to school, pick them up in the afternoon, give them a snack, and I'd pick them up usually 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And because I had to depend on crock pots, I'd load it up the night before, stick it, turn it on in the morning. When you got home at night, it was ready to go, but it was so hot. It was just horrible. My daughters will not go near a crock pot to this day. So that was the first group. And then a few years later, the agency had a group of 4 from Austin. They were 2, 3, 5, and 6.
Well, let me back up a second. We loved these kids, and it was going well, and we felt like we had a calling for more kids. So we actually put in an application.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, we put in an application saying we were open
to more,
to whatever might come. And but that application we submitted included the input from the 3 children that we now had, and so it was a group decision. And so go ahead.
Well, no, you should tell them about what the agency sent us a video of the younger ones,
yeah,
2, 3, 5, and 6.
This one didn't go quite as fast. It was like at least 6 months before they even contacted us. But it still went pretty quick once it started moving. And they did send us a video of these 4 kids that were up for adoption. They had placed them in separate homes and were about to pull the trigger on them being adopted
separately.
4 separate homes. And so they just asked us, would we be willing to consider taking all 4, since we had taken a group of 4. And so we talked about it as a family, and we agreed that we were open to it. And let's go ahead and go through the process. And so we got this video of these, focused in on each child for 2 or 3 minutes. Little Mary was singing.
That was so sweet.
Mary had a little lamb.
She was in this little pink pinafore. She was doing this little thing. Mary had a little lamb. It was
really sweet.
Tears in your heart.
And her three brothers. We watched the video, and the three kids were sitting in front of us on the floor.
Big kids, yeah.
Our three children, and they turned around and looked at us and goes, "Well, they don't look like bad kids." And we said, "Well, we don't think they're bad kids, but why do you say that?" "Well, isn't that why we were adopted? Because we were bad kids."
That's sad.
Oh man, our hearts just about crushed. It was a very somber moment that we had never picked up on that in the 5 years they were with us. And we wouldn't have been applying for more kids if it had been some kind of a terrible experience. You know, it was a great experience. And these kids were so worthy of our love. And despite the abuse and the abandonment and all the reasons they had not to trust adults, you know, by then they were trusting us.
They were trying to trust us,
Well, anyway, I don't want to make it sound like it was all just wonderful stuff. There was plenty of anxious moments and plenty of hardship still ahead of us as they got into their teenage years. But it's that way now. I mean, they're great kids. We're so glad to be their parents. And these four did join us. And there was a honeymoon period for what, 2 or 3 months, something like that, where everybody was on best behavior.
And then all hell broke
loose. Then it became the rambunctious kids I remember growing up, fighting with my brothers and sisters, and then
all kinds of trouble.
Yeah, but we made it through it all right.
And then the children, the older group, really wanted to find out about their older brother Patrick, that the mother had placed with the maternal grandmother. In Texas, the laws are such that you cannot get any information until the youngest of the group is of age. And so while they didn't want to know anything about their parents because their parents had been abusive, that they really wanted to track down Patrick. And so after Bob turned 18, we were able to contact the agency. The agency contacted the grandmother. The grandmother said, well, it just turns out that we put Patrick in the service as a teenager because he was so difficult to handle because he didn't know what happened to his siblings. He was angry that his mother didn't tell him anything. She just dropped him at his grandmother's. And so he really became a difficult teenager. They put him in the service, and his grandmother told us that, now we were living in Memphis at the time, that...
Yeah, we just recently moved there.
We just moved there, and he was living in North Mississippi, about an hour away from us. Talk about how God works. So Patrick came up, and the four of them, so the three we had adopted as well as Patrick, spent an entire weekend at the Embassy Suites putting the pieces together and trying to understand what had happened to one another. Because that was just, for the three we had, that was a hole in their heart. And for Patrick, it was a hole in his heart. And this allowed, it was so healing for them to get together and to be able to share in this. And ultimately, Patrick has become part of the family. While we didn't adopt him, he's number 8. But
spiritually, we certainly have.
He did. He went through,
and he's a prominent part of our family.
He is very much. He went through RCIA and became Catholic. We taught him to be an ophthalmic tech, and he became certified. So he had a real career. I mean, something that he could depend on as a job, and not just this bouncing around from one fast food place to another. And he's just a great guy. We just love him so much. So
and all of them, they each had their own road to travel. Mostly a discovery road. A whole lot of letting go of pain and anger road. And that we were witnesses to, that we really didn't understand. But how could we? We've never ridden in their boots. I don't know how I would have reacted. Probably a lot worse, actually. But it was painful. There were plenty of mornings when we woke up and a child was missing.
Runaways.
A child had left. 6 of the 7 that we have legally adopted, we all had moments like that. But even with the 7th child, we all had moments of crises, of confusion. Why did you do this? Well, we didn't do that. That was the birth family. And the confusion and the who am I and what do I want to be? I remember talking to one of them after the runaway multiple times. what should we do? What do you want to do? I don't know, Dad. I
just want to run.
I just got to go.
They're just running away from these inside demons.
Yeah. But for every moment of anguish and genuine suffering on our part, there are, eons of time of joy and fun, the sort of things families do, go to Disney World or the Grand Canyon, praying together, doing our best to anticipate their future with them and to offer insight of what we went through. It was a mixed bag for them. Mom and Dad, we can never live up to your standards. We can never accomplish what you've accomplished. It was like what we were doing, was just another impossible step for them to take, which they ultimately broke through those self-limiting barriers, but not without their own suffering and their own pain. And I'm so, we both are, we're so proud of them for what they've accomplished.
For a while there, we were spending so much time in juvenile court, though. I wanted my name on one of those benches. This is my reserved seat right here.
Cathy would come home and said, well, Dr. So-and-so is talking about how his, let's see, his son is the captain of the football team and going to Harvard next year, and their daughter's a head cheerleader and going to Stanford next year. And
we'd be at the scrub sink, getting ready to go into surgery. And
we're trying to get kids through high school.
Just go through high school. Just high
school. So one Christmas, I was so frustrated with all the stories we were getting and how wonderful life is everywhere around us except our home, it seemed like. The Christmas letter that year was how many kids we had in jail that year and how many were in juvenile court, and we were celebrating because everybody was out and made it, and
we got more comments about that Christmas letter than any other one. Finally, someone said the truth about what's going on in their lives.
It was pretty real, but what a blessings. We wouldn't hesitate to do it all again.
And so it was our move to Memphis, which was Tom's career move, which is where we started Southern Eye Associates, and grew that practice to where we had 3 surgery centers and a very large referral group. And when we needed money for our work in Sierra Leone is when we sold that practice.
Yeah. Well, let's back up to our first mission trip.
So because this passion for mission had been eating away at me for a number of years, I started bugging Tom. God's calling me to do this. I need to do this. And so the American Academy of Ophthalmology has a book of all these mission programs. You can go for a couple of weeks, you can go for a couple of years, you can go live in whatever. And so I'm flipping through it and I find one for 2 weeks. And the guy who coordinates it's in Chicago. So I called him up and I said, I'm really interested in doing some mission work. And he goes, great. March of 1988, we got an opening and fabulous. I said, well, who's going to go? Whoever you want. No, I mean, do you have a group going? He goes, whatever you put together is fine. I said, no, you don't understand. I have no clue of what I'm doing. What do I need to bring? Everything that you're going to need. Well, how do I know what I need? I mean, I don't know what to do. I was so beside myself. And he said, you'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. So by this point, Tom's patting me on the head. Yeah, sure, you're really going to go. I mean, now I had my passport and all my stuff together, and people, and talk about how God works. So I'm begging everybody, surgical reps, pharmaceutical reps, everybody to give me either a donation or whatever. And so this one guy comes in and he goes, oh, Shanzer, would you happen to know Father Frank Shanzer from Port Arthur, Texas? And I went, that's my uncle. He goes, I was his first altar boy. And he gave me a check for $1,000. This is 1988. That's amazing, just amazing that you would get that kind of money. And so we just boxed up all this stuff and we just show up at the airport with boxes. We just assumed the airport would take 40 boxes. We're so stupid.
We're ready. We're ready to go. Here's our luggage. And the check-in lady's like, really? What what box have you all lived in for the last 10 years?
But this is before 9/11 and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it was 1988, yeah.
So anyway, she excused herself, and then she came back and said, my supervisor said we can do it.
Yeah.
They didn't charge us anything extra.
We explained our story.
And we had all the paperwork, because you have to have an invitation from somebody in the other country, and then you have to have evidence that you're being supported from here. So, the guy in Chicago had a letter for us. We had a letter from these people in Abac, Nigeria, and all this was, we had the right paperwork, and they were so nice. And
But this decision to go was a big decision, even if it had just been Cathy and I. But we had 3 kids that had been abandoned. And so we couldn't just lightly say, oh, well, if we get killed in Africa. And that was my view, is we're going to go and we're going to be killed. I've seen enough Tarzan movies. I know what happened. Speaking of stupid. And yet, they were too young for us to sit them down and saying, we've weighed the risk, and we think the risk is minimal. And here are the precautions that we've taken if for whatever reason it didn't work out. But as much as we love you, we love other people in need as well. And they were fine with it. I mean, I don't know if they ever worried about us or not too much,
I think your parents, as babysitters, suffered more than the kids did.
Yeah, I think they did too. There was a several generation difference there. But the main apprehensions I had was the fear of the unknown. I just didn't know. I didn't grow up from the 3rd grade thinking someday I'm going to be a medical missionary. I bought into it academically and knew all about it before we got married, that was part of her goals, and I was okay with it. But it wasn't until we actually got there and saw the people that were in need and started taking care of them and heard the thank yous and got the hugs, and then I was all in at that point, whatever feelings
I was convinced that if God calls you to it, God will see you through it. And so when we got off of the plane in Lagos, and these 12-year-olds had machine guns pointed at us, and Tom's going, we're going to die. We're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, we'd heard all these stories of
boy soldiers. And,
young soldiers looking for bribes, etc. Didn't know how much of it was true or anything like that. It was just, maybe it's only somewhat natural to kind of fear the worst. I don't know. But everything was kind of sort of happening like we feared, oh my gosh, soldiers, young boys really with M16s, bucking on the boxes. But they never got a bribe from us. We didn't have money to give them.
We didn't have any money.
If we wanted to.
And then the next day when they told us, now they sell more boarding passes than they have seats for. So when you see the plane that's going to go from Lagos to Calabar, when you see it land, start running towards it.
And claim your seat first, so you
because
have one.
In a place that 3 people sit, they lift the things up and 5 people sit there. Nobody uses a seatbelt, and there's chickens and all kinds of stuff on the flights. And
it was crazy.
And so
crazy.
we're running in front of the plane, and Tom's going, look, there's oil leaking. Look, those tires are bald. I'm saying, don't look that way. Look that way.
So that's when we invented the one more time prayer, which we've used for several reasons on different occasions. But that particular occasion was,
help us do this
please help this plane make it one more time. And it did.
And then once we landed in Calabar, then the nuns picked us up there. Yeah. And they loaded all our boxes up. So the nuns were at Mercy Hospital in Abac, Nigeria. So we had a bit to go on land travel.
And before we got to the actual village, we saw on trees these posters of American Eye Doctor and the dates, how they were announcing it to the region that come to Mercy Hospital and get some eye care. And they were announcing Cathy, had her cute little picture of her face. And American Eye Doctor is coming to Mercy Hospital. And it was really quite sweet. And we got there, and to the extent they could roll out the red carpet, they did. The standards are a lot different than what you think of, but they tried their best, and they did fine. We were fine. We learned about taking taking a bath by dumping a bucket of water.
No,
over
no.
your
And
head.
this one, remember, we had an inch of water. We would
No,
turn
I know.
the faucet on in the morning, and by the time we got back at night, there was like an inch of water in the tub, and we both would just splash it on.
Yeah.
We were so hot.
But, that was good. That was a great start, and we just kept going.
And that was
All
where
the time.
you held the flashlight so that I could see to do the surgery.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Cathy was in the middle of surgery and the generator went off, so I just held the flashlight. That's how I would help.
that was also where I learned how to go to the market to buy a razor blade to do a skin graft on somebody who needed a graft on their eyelid.
All kinds of
Yeah.
inventive surgery.
So it was very creative. And now I feel comfortable doing all those crazy things. But then, I was only a few years out of my training and I'd never done anything like that before. But yet, you get to the point where it's either me or nobody, So.
And it was, the first impressions were just so vivid. The lizards hanging out in the screen windows.
And coming into the surgery room.
Moths and butterflies flying around. Yeah, it didn't matter inside or outside. They were both. And things that we had brought that in this country are disposable, one and done, being reprocessed and re-sterilized and reused and hanging.
They
on
wash all
clotheslines.
their gloves and they hang them up and you reuse them. Like you were teasing about gloves. So they hang up their little plastic gloves and you reuse them. It's just amazing.
But anyway, it was a great experience. And then for the next few years, we continued as the quote I team. We started networking, and the local Methodist church in Memphis, through a series of connections, we met a man and his wife who were from Sierra Leone, that were part of the Methodist mission group that was going to Africa. Their country, Sierra Leone, was in war all during the 90s, so they couldn't go there. But Mozambique and Zimbabwe and I guess those were the main countries we kept going to. More in the south side of the continent of Africa. We would be the I team. Dad died in '98, and later that year we went, and Mom went with us, and that was a great trip, very healing for her.
She was wonderful.
Yeah. And then in the late '90s, as the war died down in Sierra Leone, our friend Sam asked us the whole team, if we would consider working in Sierra Leone to help them rebuild, and we did. And for the first few years, 2 or 3 years, Cathy worked in
the capital city.
In the Methodist Eye Hospital in the capital city of Freetown. And during that time, we began to meet Archbishop Gunda, the Catholic Archbishop there in Sierra Leone. I remember the first time you met him, you put that button on him.
Well, we were getting some surgical supplies from a group that's called Surgical Eye Expeditions, so SEE. And they want you to put their buttons on and take some photos so that they use that as their, sort of their publications and their work to be showing that, okay, we're working in Sierra Leone, we're working in this country, that country. So anyway, so we finally, Teresa Gunda was his sister. She happened to be a doctor. And one of the things that I kept running into was really bad inflammation in the eye. Now, in the United States, you do this huge workup looking for connective tissue disorders, infections, inflammation, all this kind of stuff. But over there, I couldn't figure out how to get the lab work done because there's nowhere to go. So a number of the patients that I encountered in the capital city in Freetown, Sierra Leone, had an inflammatory process and needed a workup to try to figure out what the etiology was. Was it infectious? Did they have onchocerciasis or some of the weird organisms? And so I contacted Dr. Teresa Gunda, thinking she could help me with the lab work, but it didn't exist there. There was no way I could do any type of workup there that we would normally do in the United States. But in the process, she said, I want you to meet my brother. I think, well, okay, fine. Who's your brother? Oh, he's the Archbishop. Okay, wow. You don't get to meet Archbishops very often. And so she took us to where he lived. And that's when I took this little Surgical Eye Expeditions button and I said, Archbishop Gunda, could I put this on you and we'll take a quick photo because the company that helps us with our supplies would really like to use this.
We had known him all of 5 minutes.
Yeah, we didn't know him at all.
And he has this gravelly voice, and I can just hear it now. I thought, oh, that reminds me of Cathy when I asked her out on our first date. You Americans, if it will help my people, I will wear your button. And so
we took some
begrudgingly,
pictures.
he took it.
Begrudgingly. But he was the one who challenged us to go up country where they had no access to health care. And he was actually pretty cute. He goes, Cathy, you're a Catholic woman. Why are you working with the Methodists? And I said, Archbishop, I can't tell the difference in a Methodist cataract or a Catholic cataract. For that reason, I can't tell the difference in a Muslim cataract. They all look the same to me. And so he challenged us to go up to this little village, Sarabu, which is his home village where he grew up. And he said, I want you to go up there and I want you to build a clinic there. And we came back and I said, Archbishop Gunda, with all due respect, I need stuff like a building, clean, water, electricity, surgical supplies, instruments, microscopes. He goes, the problem with you Americans is you have no faith in God. If you had faith in God, there would be an eye clinic in Sarabu, Sierra Leone. We're like, okay, he pulled that faith card on us. What are we going to do now?
I know. I said, yeah, that's how I got married with this Catholic guilt stuff. Well, I guess, we looked at each other and gave it a long 2 or 3 minutes again.
Like, we never think it through these things.
And said, okay, sounds like God's leading us to Sarabu.
And Tom's background in healthcare administration and building surgery centers was invaluable at this point.
Yeah.
But not only that, but he has the right gender. Because it is so male-dominated, when you do something like this in the village, first of all, they won't talk to me, but you have to go through the town chief, the section chief, the paramount chief. All of this has to be discussed with all these chiefs before you can even walk on the property. And of course, they would meet with Tom, and all the decisions were made because the men just sit around doing nothing, and the women just work so hard. It's just amazing. I mean, it's just frustrating. You see the women walking, they've got something on their head, they got a baby in this arm, and they've got one strapped to their back, and they're carrying a bundle of wood over here, and they're headed to the farm to work in the farm. It's just amazing. The women work so hard. But anyway, you could tell about the meeting if you wanted, but.
Well, it is a male-dominated society, to be sure. But we were also still shortly after this horrendous war when a lot of the men had been killed. So some of this that we were witnessing was out of necessity because there were no men. But
this was the Blood Diamond, war you might have heard about.
But I do confess, I rarely see the men with 2 or 3 kids draped on them with a bunch of stuff on their head on top of that, out in the fields, dropping a kid and still continuing to but I mean, delivering a child and still continuing to work in the field. I mean, tough women, to be sure. I think tougher than any of the men.
Yeah, for sure.
But nonetheless, tradition has it that the men make the decisions there, and so we did a pilot trip to Sarabu in early 2005.
Yeah.
We came back to the bishop again and said, Bishop, we just don't have the resources we need, and that's actually when he dropped the faith card on us.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
And we said, okay, we'll go develop. So I went back later in the year. And helped the clinic get built and equipped, and we made all kinds of arrangements, liquidated what few funds we had to launch this clinic. And in January, on Cathy's birthday, January 7th, 2006, Southern Eye Clinic of Sarabu opened up. Cathy and her mom traveled over a few days beforehand to join me there, and we still didn't fully. We're still learning about traditions over there. But the first thing you do is you bless it. And you thank all the generations ahead of you for this moment and ask their support and blessings as well. And then you party for about 24 hours.
Oh my gosh.
We thought it was going to be a couple hours opening ceremony and then we start seeing patients. No. It opened on the 7th, but we started seeing patients on the 8th, maybe the 8th. They might have even been the 9th.
Yeah.
But the celebration was amazing, and they were so happy and so excited. All the traditional dancing that took place and the music. Well, I passed out, long before it was over.
It's just it's so humbling. These people have had their cataracts for decades, and their pupils are completely white because the cataracts are so bad, and because they can't see to get through a door, they've been stuck in their little hut, and they have to have a caregiver. So someone has to take them out to the bush so they can pee. And then someone has to be there to feed them. Well, that means a child can't go to school, or it means that one of the workers can't be out in the field. So if I take out one cataract, I free up 2 people. A kid gets back in school, or a worker gets back in the field. And it's so humbling to think that you're making that impact. But some of the stories are so adorable. Like this one grandmother said, "Oh, I can see now. My grandchildren can no longer steal the meat off my plate." Or this last trip, this man stops me and he said, Doc, you did surgery on my boy. I said, I know. And he said, now I say, son, what is that? And my boy, he says, Pa, that's a goat. And then I'll say, son, what is that? My son will say, Pa, that's a tree. And I am so happy my son, when we came here, my son could not see goats. My son could not see trees. And he starts crying. But now my son can see these things, and it just touches your heart. It's just...
There were 2 sons. They had to be in their 80s, carrying mom into the clinic, who was pushing 100 or 110, whatever. Couldn't have weighed more than 75 pounds. Blind from cataracts for the last 30, 40 years of her life. Spoke enough English to understand, but not enough for it to be totally fluent, for sure. With the sons, I did. The mom, not any. Well, she spoke some English too, because that's how we knew she could see. Well, they walk her to the entrance door into the operating theater, which is a glass door, and the surgical techs take her and put her on the table and get her ready for surgery. And while the surgery is going on, I'm telling the 2 sons what's happening. There's a TV monitor above the operating station, so they could kind of see it as well. And it's amazing to watch to begin with. The surgery goes well. The technicians lift her off the table. They bring her back to the door. The door opens, and the sons go, Mom, can you see? Can you see? And she stands there staring. Now the 2 sons are at the door. I'm standing behind them, and she's facing them coming out of the theater. And what could only have been 2 or 3 seconds seemed like 10 minutes, because she just stood there and didn't say anything. And finally she said, "What's that big white man doing here?" and the sons start crying. Mom, you can see they hug her, and she's smiling because she can see. Well, that's as good a testimony as any to what decision Cathy made when Archbishop insisted that we do this. She said, "Look, Tom," she turns to me, "we've been using whatever, flashlights, light bulbs, magnifying glasses, whatever equipment they had at existing facilities, I was okay with, because that was their business. We were visitors. But now you're asking me to be responsible for the technology and for the type of surgery that we do. I'm not willing to do surgery in this clinic we're going to build. I'm not willing to do surgery there unless it's surgery that I'd be willing to have myself," which meant we're going to bring the expensive equipment that she's using in the United States and purchase it and bring it to Africa. And it's the only modern eye surgery clinic in West Africa. And we draw now from 7 or 8 countries that come to this, because like this lady, they get off the table seeing. If there's no other problems with the eye, and sometimes there are, it's not 100%, because on average, the adults have been blind for over 20 years from cataracts. In this country, it starts bothering you a little bit, we go have cataract surgery. Over there, because due to this short supply of facilities, the lack of money, even if there were facilities, and our clinic's 100% charity. If they can get there, we'll take great care of them. But that was the challenge, and that's now the reputation of this clinic: is go to Sarabu, they'll take care of you, and if the rest of your eye is working, get that cataract out of the way, and Dr. Cathy will take good care of you. Mr. Tom's fine woman will take good care of you. Actually, is what's been told.
Because they watch me work so hard all day long. And they never come to me to thank me. They go to Tom and they go, "Oh, Mr. Tom, you bring a very fine woman. She works very hard."
At first, when I was told that, I was kind of laughing inside. This is great. This is great, because back in America, she's the big cheese. It's the doctor. I'm Mr. Dr. Shanzer, but over here, I'm Mr. Tom.
And I'm his fine woman.
And so, but I would still nonetheless try to explain it to him. So, thank you. I appreciate that, but really it's not me, it's her. And they would patiently listen. And then when I finished explaining, they would go, "Thank you, Mr. Tom. You bring a fine woman." So I would still repeat it. And I got to thinking, well, she is a fine woman. She really is a fine woman. I can't exactly argue with what they're saying. That's the Mr. Tom's fine woman. For our 30th wedding anniversary, I made a short movie clip highlighting her work in Africa, and I titled it Mr. Tom's fine woman.
The hardest part for me, though, is that because we don't have a lot of the electrophysiological equipment that we have in the United States, I work really hard to get these white cataracts out, only to find out that their retina has been destroyed due to some type of onchocerciasis or some type of weird organism or something. And that's always disappointing, because you got the cataract out and the front of the eye looks beautiful, the implant's centered, everything looks perfect. You look in the back of the eye and it's just trashed. But
and it's confusing to the patient.
It's confusing to the patient.
I've had the surgery. How come I'm not seeing?
Yeah.
You know, and the language barrier and the cultural barrier, and trying to explain. About 10% of the cataract surgery that Cathy does is on children.
And a child that's born with a cataract is at risk for what's called amblyopia, which means that if they don't get a clear image that's coming into their eye, the pathway from their eye to the brain, the visual cortex, does not mature properly. So when a child comes in who's had either early, like born with a cataract, or had it develop early on, if those cataracts are not removed, and say you wait until they're 12 years old, those pathways are not formed and they will not get good vision no matter what. So we try to get them done as soon as possible. The problem is that we don't have any monitoring equipment. And so we have a guy that will...
or people that would know how to use monitoring.
Well, that's true. So we have a guy that will give them, start an IV and give them ketamine, and then he puts his hand on their chest and he says, "Doc, they're still breathing." And it's very nerve-wracking to worry about the child surviving your surgery, but it's also very rewarding. So once we try to do one eye, and then the next week do the second eye, so that those visual pathways will be stimulated, and that they will... they'll develop those pathways, and that they'll have decent vision. We have one child that his mom comes back every time we're there to show us his report card, because when he came, he was, as a baby, would not reach for things, and so same thing. We did one eye, and then waited a bit and did his second eye, and now he's doing so well. His name is Mustafa. And on our website is a video recording of his mom where she says, "What you have done for my son, only God can thank you." And she's just crying and crying and crying. And it's just so rewarding to know that we've made that impact on a child's life, because unfortunately in underdeveloped countries, children that are handicapped, whether it's sight or limb or whatever, are frequently discarded and left out in the out in the road or somewhere, and no one cares for them, and they're just not, they're discarded because they can't contribute, and it's already so hard to live. I'll give you an example. If a woman has twins and she doesn't feel like she has enough milk to breastfeed both of them, she lets the runt die. It's just, there's no way. She's got to make a choice. And it's not that she doesn't respect life, and it's not that she doesn't love that child. She just knows her chances of having one child live is better if she only breastfeeds one. And it just hurts your heart to think that someone would have to make such a difficult decision when she loves both of them, but yet what does she do? So
eye care has kind of been the cornerstone of what we do. And historically, Cathy's done upwards of 60,000, 70,000 cataract surgeries, and plus some other types of surgery, and 10,000 to 15,000 of those have been in Africa. We now see about 15,000 patients a year. Our last mission trip in January was our most prolific, where we had 5 surgeons, and we did just under 500 surgeries. There's not one trip, and there's surgery going on throughout the year as well, but the 2 trips that we go are the main times that we're doing surgery.
Right.
But after being there really just a couple of trips, and the clinic's open year-round, and people come from all around West Africa to get eye care services. We're constantly giving out glasses, medicines, examining patients, and those that have surgery, scheduling them in the future for future surgery. And that's great, and that's a big part of what we do. And when we started, we thought that's what we were about. But another big difference of having built the clinic that we were responsible for was that we're now citizens of this village, and we couldn't help but notice other issues. And so as a result, we've now, of which eye care is one ministry, we've got 12 ministries. We develop water wells, food programs, education programs, sports activities. We built a computer center. we all kinds of cultural activities. The garage mechanic services, we named the garage the same as my dad's place in Dallas, Belmont Garage. But all the people that are coming there, however they get there, typically their vehicles are breaking down, they're getting flat tires or whatever. And so we repair a lot because we have mechanics that keep the generators going. They also
Right.
keep vehicles
Keep the
going,
vehicles going.
not just our own vehicles.
But most of the people actually walk. And so they've been walking for days and days, and they get to the village, and they have no money, and they have no food, and they haven't eaten for days because they've been walking. So you know how when you're really hungry, you get jittery? And so we do have a group of volunteer women that fix food for them. And here in the United States, we say nothing to eat after midnight. Over there, when it's time for them to have surgery, we give them this big thing of beans and rice because that high carbohydrate meal makes them sleepy, just like we are after Thanksgiving meal. And so literally, they're in there eating, they get real sleepy. We bring them into the operating room. We numb up their eye because we don't have any type of sedation other than beans and rice. And so they get real sleepy. We lay them down and we do their surgery. Now, granted, people over there are much more stoic than the people in the United States. They don't worry about any anxiety or that they need a sedative. Once they get that food in their belly, they really are pretty comfortable and they're snoozing. And so we do their surgery. When I tell people my form of anesthesia is beans and rice, they're like, what? But it works. So that's pretty much what we do. Yeah. Except for the children. They get an IV. So
in the food program, there's a church in Memphis, St. Louis Catholic Church, that donates about 100,000 meals a year to our program. And we match it or then some. So since 2009, I think we started that program, we've served upwards now of a couple of million meals in this little village. A lot of it to visiting families that are coming for their eye care, but a lot of it right there in the village in that area as well. And so it's been just probably developing the water wells and giving them good water is probably the most life-saving thing that we've done.
It has been, and the people that helped us with that actually did sanitation and hygiene classes. So they came and taught the first group, and then they watched that group teach the next group, and the next group, and the next group, so that everybody in the village learned about the importance of washing your hands and not going and working in the agricultural and then coming to the water wells and getting animal feces on the things that people were using. And so that was really helpful to the point that when Ebola went through, because Sierra Leone was one of those most affected by Ebola, the guys in the eye clinic went around to people giving them bars of soap and reminding them the importance of hand washing. We had no cases of Ebola in our village. They were all over the rest of the country, but we had none in our village. So that was huge.
Yeah. When we started, about half the kids in the village were not going to school. They couldn't afford what little the fees were and what little the uniforms cost. They couldn't afford it. And
they have no books in the schools. It breaks your heart.
So we set a goal to get all the kids in school, and we've now given out over 2,000 scholarships since we started that program. And now they range from kindergarten to medical school.
So we have a kid in medical school, a native Sierra Leonean, who rotated through our clinic because he was going to be a medical officer, and they have to go through all these specialties. So he did OB-GYN, and then he did ophthalmology. And ophthalmology, he said, I love ophthalmology. Can I come back again? So he came back again, and then his third time around, he said, would you support me to go to medical school if I promised to come back to the village as an ophthalmologist? Of course we would, because, I'm no spring chicken. And he goes, oh, Dr. Cathy, when you are old and feeble, I will be here to take your place. Francis, get out of here. I'll never be old and feeble. Go away. Anyway, so he's in medical school now. And Will's Eye.
He's just finishing up his 5th year.
Yeah, and Will's Eye Hospital in Philadelphia is helping us find a residency program in ophthalmology for him. And they'll help us, get him established there. But he's so excited, not just to be there as a surgeon, but to be there to do some research and to build the program there, do so many things that...
I mean, this young man
he's on fire. He's just great.
He's tremendous. The folks at Will's Eye are so impressed with him, as we all are. He's top of his class. It's just, he's doing fabulous. We pray for him every morning for sure to just hang in there.
He's a great kid. Great kid.
But there's a lot of promise there for sure.
So we feel like from the standpoint of our human resources, we're kind of getting things lined up. And
yeah, we started an endowment campaign a couple of years ago, and that's going well to shore up the long-term financial sustainability of the mission. It looks like the human resources parts coming online. Our last trip we had 5 surgeons, and this next trip we'll have 3 surgeons. So it's not all just on Cathy's shoulders now. And in fact, more surgeries being done by other surgeons than by what Cathy's doing now. And so whatever God's plan is, it seems to be unfolding pretty well.
So in January we worked really hard, and when we got back in February,
we'd been home about a week, and Cathy started getting really nauseated. Not just
upset
a little
bit,
stomach, but just
to the point where I was afraid I was going to vomit on a patient. I mean, it was horrible. And I went to my internist and I said, I don't know what's going on. This is really strange, but I am so nauseated and I'm so fatigued. I'm so tired. Normally I have lots and lots of energy. And so I told him, I don't know what's going on. So we tried multiple different medications, and he's a floor below me. So I would just run down there and I'd say, you gotta help me. I can't do this. I mean, something's wrong. And so finally he thought it was all GI because I'd just been in Africa. So it must be I got a bug or picked up a parasite or something weird.
And there were other things going on in our life, so I was traveling in different directions. And so I got back just in time for Cathy to have an endoscopy. This
upper GI thing.
This was a little over 3 weeks ago, and it became more urgent as actually earlier that morning, the nauseousness was so strong. And she started having fuzzy vision. She got somewhat disoriented. So
we had to cancel surgery.
The operating staff said, time out. This is not the Dr. Shanzer we know and love. Something's not right. So they did the endoscopy that afternoon, but didn't find anything. So while all that was in a puzzle, I got home just in time to drive her home from the endoscopy. And then that evening, other symptoms crept in. Severe headaches and
like a crushing vice around my head.
And she'd walk to the bathroom and just fall. And so I took her to the emergency room about 10:30 that evening when the falling, as that was unfolding and beginning. So after they completed all their testing and discovered this brain tumor, that the neurosurgeon thought that there was a good chance we could get in and get out without too much deficit. The surgery took place 2 weeks ago. And went really well. And so back to one and done. We thought we were one and done here too. Get the surgery out of the way. They were just amazed that she had absolutely no signs of deficit of any kind. And that was great. And I had my wife back. She wasn't having the nauseousness. For the next 2 or 3 days, it was like, this is behind us. And then came the pathology.
But let me back up just a tiny bit, because so many people were praying for us. So many people. The Muslims in our village started fasting, and as soon as they heard the diagnosis, and of course they moved right into Ramadan, so that meant their fasting has really been long. The children at Epiphany's grade school, which is our parish in Pennsylvania, they got this little prayer blanket and they all prayed over it. And then they sent me a note with their little printed names of Anna and Joseph, and it was so heartwarming. It was so sweet. And then all the different congregations that we know, as far as the Dominicans and the Benedictines and the Cistercians and Carmelites, and it's just so many people were praying for us. One of my friends in Memphis, who's an optometrist, and we've worked together for so long, he said, we are going to storm heaven with prayers for you. And so when I woke up from the surgery in the ICU, I opened my eyes and I had the most incredible sense of gratitude, warmth, compassion, love, peace. It was like I was just being surrounded with the Lord. It was so beautiful. It was like all those prayers everybody had sent up were now coming down, and they were just encircling me and bathing me in this warmth and this compassion and this love and this energy. It was such an amazing sensation that I didn't want it to ever go away. I was just laying there loving how I was feeling. It was a sensation I had never had before. It was so amazingly beautiful. It was like a touch of heaven. It was so wonderful. And so right after that is when the neurosurgeon comes in, and she says, the surgery went great, but I need to be sure you don't have any deficits, because I'm really concerned that, you could have some weakness or some paralysis. And she goes through her little mumbo jumbo, follow the light, squeeze my hand, all this stuff. And there was nothing. And she said, I am really amazed. I really thought, she said the surgery went beautifully. There was not a single problem. They did all this stealth imaging, which is like a GPS of your brain. And it was so cool. The technology was so absolutely amazing. I was so fascinated by the whole thing. And I obviously was asleep, but I had a friend take pictures because I had to find out what's going on. And
well, that and YouTube, again,
I studied the surgery beforehand. I knew exactly how the whole surgery was going to go. But anyway, so we really did at that point, because there were no deficits and she was so positive about the surgery. We really did think we were finished, that was the end of it.
Then Dr. Kim walked in a couple of days later and said, the pathology report is tough, and started explaining to us about glioblastoma and the bad statistics, from a science standpoint of people not surviving this typically for more than a year or so. And so that was a shocker. And all of a sudden, the euphoria we felt from the successful surgery was ancient history. And now we're talking about a totally different challenge that we had to start trying to understand as best we could. We certainly were continuing to pray, and everybody praying for us. And as big a shock as it was to us, our friends and families, they were shocked as well.
And she was so adorable. Our neurosurgeon, she said, I shaved your head over here, but I left the top long so you can cover it up. I said, oh, you were so wonderful. You're such a great neurosurgeon, but you are a lousy hairstylist. Anyway, but when someone tells you to get your life in order, that you're not going to live much longer, when you thought you're going to live 100 more years, that was a real shocker. And so after we finished crying and carrying on like blithering idiots, we decided that we can either approach this joyfully or we can approach this sorrowfully. We thought we had a decision to make. And so we decided we're going to attack this thing joyfully. And
what we don't know how many
we don't know how long
precious moments we have left. Okay, most people don't survive it, but there are some who have been around for 20 years since having the diagnosis. So we don't know what God's plan is. There's no doubt on the human suffering side of the equation. If I reflect on it long enough, I can get pretty unhappy. I can get pretty sad.
But I looked at it.
I can shed a lot of tears.
But
that's not how I want to spend my time.
No, but I really thought, my gosh, what a gift God has given me. He's telling me that I've got X amount of time to live. Now, granted, nobody knows how long you have to live, but this is a gift because I can find people that I haven't seen in a long time. We can pray together. I can see family members that I love. I can hug them and say, you're so important to me. I'm so grateful that you're in my life. And whether we're talking about family or friends or high school friends or whatever, this is a gift. It's a gift to tie up all those past relationships and be sure that I've told them all that I love them and told them all that they're important to me. And in the course of me talking about this, Tom decided to make my journey home and to have these masses along the way, that not only would we be praying together, but we would truly be offering the sacrifice of the Mass with the Holy Eucharist, saying the Rosary, pulling our Blessed Mother in. And it's been so beautiful. It's been so beautiful. We don't have a tiny bit of sadness about
this. It's like the Holy Spirit choreographed it. Because our doctor said, look, you're still recovering from surgery. So while there is a very strong regimen of chemotherapy and radiation therapy and perhaps other things, for the next 30 days or so, we're not going to do any of that. We just want your body to rest from the surgery. Once those therapies begin, she's going to be tethered to the hospital pretty well. So we had this time where we're free. And so the road trip became sort of an obvious choice of.
And Tom worked so hard on it. He did such a beautiful job. Okay. He worked so hard.
We've been to plenty of funerals where we said, wouldn't it have been nice if we could have gotten together
and hugged him before
while this person was still alive? Well, maybe that's what this is. Maybe not. We might be 10 years from now, all of our friends going, wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to die. What's going on here?
But even if God uses this time of my suffering through this, uses this to bring my children closer to the Lord, or to bring other friends closer to the Lord, or whatever, or maybe he's got a totally different plan. Whatever it is, if the Lord wants to use me for this, it's sort of like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I made a mistake of saying that when the surgeon asked if should we do the surgery next Monday. The two surgeons looked at each other and said, "Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and do it." They looked at me like, "Are you okay with this?" And I thought, well, sounds like it's a no-brainer. And so,
They didn't think it was too funny.
I wasn't trying to be funny. Oh, anyway, that's kind of where we're at.
So that's where we are in our life story, and we just feel so blessed. We feel blessed to be able to take this journey home. We feel blessed to be with family members and people that we love so much, and to have the opportunity to hug them and to say, "You really are important to me. You know, I'm so grateful that you're in my life. I'm so grateful we have these few minutes together, even if it is just a few minutes. It's okay." Because God has a plan, and we totally placed the plan in His hands, and we just hope we don't miss any parts of it along the way, that we do what He's called us to do.
We're halfway through this journey. We're in Corpus with my sister and her family, and we've traveled over 2,000 miles, and it looks like we've got a couple of thousand more to go.
Yeah.
As we start heading north now and returning ultimately back to Pennsylvania.
Now our
But
ultimate
it's already been terrific. Well, the ultimate on this particular road trip, but in our car, but then we complete the road trip and finally in Africa in June on the 16th, which will be our 44th wedding anniversary.
So I have to go there and hug my people there, because there's little Tom and Cathy's running around the village. I have to go hug them, and I have to tell them I love them, and then we'll do our 44th anniversary there in Sarabu, and then we'll come back.
And so what began with a short moment in a kitchen at a retreat center outside with the Catholic Student Center, the person fell instantly and madly in love with, I still am madly in love with.
And I love you too. And he's a good nurse, by the way. Nurse Ratchet over here. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this.